Hello, everyone. Chris Yates with Inside the Huddle. Antonio Williams has been gracious enough to be with us during this the last dance. Michael Jordan. It's over, unfortunately. Overall, what did you think of the series?
I thought it was great. And first off, I want to say too, Chris, thank you for those kind words and thank you for sharing the platform. I love this. So thank you for opening your house, so to speak, to me.
Absolutely. I mean, everybody realized I want this guy on. Nike executive, ESPN personality, former NBA scout, and his knowledge on sports and the NBA is awesome. Good commentary. So I really appreciate your input. But what do you think? Okay, now that the series is over, some people are criticizing it. Some people are just saying, you know what? It was a great series. Just enjoy it for what it is. What's your take? Obviously, they didn't talk about the gambling. They didn't talk about failing with the Wizards. All that was more about him. It was almost it was almost a piece about him, PR, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it. What's your take?
Same thing. I think this was people should remember whenever you see documentaries like this, Chris, and you know this, but whenever you see pieces like this completed and done, there's always another sort of faction or other factions that feel like they're underrepresented, or you didn't tell this story enough, or I wasn't depicted in the most genuine sense, etc. So there's always going to be some, I don't know if there's resistance or people just not satisfied with the way that they were covered, or this is a half truth, whatever the case may be. So, because the primary, even though this documentary went into some of the other aspects of his career, it's called The Last Dance because the focus really is on that last season and how all of these things led up to that last season. So I think overall it was done really well. I think for people like us, Chris, that we live and breathe this stuff on a daily basis, maybe there wasn't a whole lot that we learned, but
no, there was a lot of stuff I learned, and everyone. To me, it wasn't a documentary. It was just him PRing, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. Let's
agreed.
It was great memories, great storytelling. I learned a lot. Like I learned about the flu game. I did not realize that was a food poisoning.
Right.
Because that was a big story.
I plead the fifth.
Did he got pizza poisoning or something? It wasn't a flu thing. Yes. I don't know. And then when you talk about people they didn't like the way they were portrayed. Recently, Horace Grant came out. He is furious. Scottie Pippen was not happy. Horace Grant said 90% of this was all lies. Why do you think, if you were a teammate, would you be offended? I thought they were portrayed okay. I mean, I didn't see, but I think people get pretty sensitive about this stuff.
Yes, they do. And even here we are, 25 years later, and people, when they were first together, almost 30 years since the last time they actually were together. And, we still have these sorts of tiffs and beefs and all these different things. And it shows how competitive the space is. And the other thing, too, is I don't think, to be honest, Chris, I don't think when Horace left the Bulls, I don't think he left on the greatest terms with the guys that were part of that first three when they won their first three championships. And, I don't know if he felt like he didn't get enough credit as a player because he was a really good player. Yeah. And I don't know if, and again, I like to make this current as well. You see this when people talk about playing with LeBron as well. You see this. And I don't know if he felt like he didn't get enough credit, or if those players felt like when they weren't successful, the onus was on them to do more. And it was like Michael was almost absolved from blame when they weren't successful.
Right.
So, and then I think when they were successful, maybe they felt like they didn't get enough credit. So I think
there's a lot of egos in sports. People don't realize that. And I want to talk about that. So the players have egos. Jerry Krause had the biggest ego around. Man, if you were Jerry Krause, I can't even get in his mind why he would dissolve that. Do you see any percent of you going, yeah, I could kind of see him doing that? Or do you think, no, there's no reason to do that?
I don't see that because, again, I think we talked about this before, Chris, that there are 4 teams that have won almost half the NBA titles.
Yeah, I love the fact that you brought up.
And so with that being said, it is so difficult to win a title, especially when you're not one of those maybe handful of legacy franchises in the NBA. And even though the Bulls are in a major market, I wouldn't necessarily consider them a legacy franchise in the NBA. And you know, they had obviously their great run with Michael, but they aren't a staple like the Celtics or the Lakers. And when you start taking those 4 teams, Celtics, Lakers, Spurs, and Bulls, 2 of those are legacy franchises, and Lakers and Celtics. The other 2 were fortunate enough through the draft to get transcendent players and have an extended run.
Where were you the Golden State Warriors in that?
You know, even with them, they won 3 titles. So you know, so they are part of that other group of organizations that have won 3. They've won 3. Miami's won 3. Detroit's won 3. So there are some organizations that have won 3, and then then there are maybe a few more that have won 2. Then there's 1, and then there's the vast majority of teams that haven't won. So with that being said, it is so difficult to win. And the Bulls, Chris, and I can say this from living in Chicago, we moved there in 2010.
Okay.
The Bulls were still amongst the league leaders in attendance in 2010, 2015. This is based off of the foundation that the Bulls laid 20 to 25 years ago.
But back to that Jerry Krause thing, his ego got in the way. Can you imagine doing that? Let's just pretend, right? I'm GM of the Bulls. Do you make that decision?
No, and that's what I'm saying, because it's so difficult to win. It's so difficult. There's so many things that have to go in your favor, and the biggest one is luck. I'll say this one really quick about Golden State. Steph Curry, who would have thought that Steph Curry's injury history before they started their championship runs would have actually played in their favor? Because at one point in time, because he signed a 4-year, $48 million contract, while he was winning MVPs, he was making $12 million a year. So he became the biggest bargain, arguably, in sports.
Right.
Because of his injury history. And so that actually played in their favor, because the Golden State Warriors, because Steph Curry was under the contract that he was under, they didn't have to do as much heavy lifting when they went and got Kevin Durant, because Steph Curry wasn't paid market value in terms of his salary. So with that being said, there are so many other things that have to go in your favor when you're trying to win a championship. And it's not just, we just have the best basketball minds in the business. Let's put them together and try to put an organization or a franchise, a championship caliber franchise together. There's so many things that have to go your way. So when you have that opportunity to amass this collection of talent that is not only immensely talented, they work well together.
You don't mess with that.
You don't mess with that.
You let it roll, man.
You let it roll.
Go as far as you can.
Let it roll.
That's amazing. So, okay, I consider it it's supposed to be a Bulls documentary. I think it's a Michael Jordan documentary. But one thing that really impressed me was Steve Kerr. When I look back at his career now and all the stuff that he did, his dad and all that stuff, but he won with the Bulls. He goes to the Spurs and wins the championship. He's now with the Golden State Warriors and wins championships. That's not luck. That's not fluke. There's something about the guy that he went with 3 organizations and won all these championships. I mean,
no question.
I came away more impressed with Steve Kerr of this documentary than I ever have. I didn't realize all that.
No question. And I often use him as an example, Chris, when I'm talking with younger players, and I'm talking about player development, because so much of your player development stems from your mentality. And so your mentality is is directly tied to how well you play on the floor. And so when you have the correct mentality, you also choose the right situations to put yourself in to be successful. And you don't approach it with so much emotion. You approach it from an educational standpoint, and you make all of your decisions and from a position of power. And the only way that you can do that is once you are playing, for example, and you're in those championship environments, you soak up everything that you possibly can.
Right. So he took it to the Spurs. He took it to his coaching style, everything.
Exactly. So he took that to the Spurs. And the crazy part about it is, how different would his career have been so Phil Jackson for a while was the head honcho in New York with the Knicks.
Right.
And so before he hired Derek Fisher, he actually had a deal in place with Steve Kerr.
Wow.
And Steve Kerr backed out of the deal when the Golden State job became open. So again, looking at the situation and saying, which one gives me the best opportunity to succeed? And you don't, how do I say this, Chris? You don't have that ability, or you don't exercise that ability to your best ability if you take yourself too seriously. And if you don't view yourself as a student of whatever profession that you're in. And his just happens to be basketball. So he took every moment. This is even going back to high school or going back to college when he played at Arizona and played for the great Lute Olson.
Right. I remember Lute Olson. Yeah.
Right. So he soaked all of that in and saw how championship players and championship organizations conduct their business. Because you have to think, Chris, to your point about him, here's the other thing that happened for him in San Antonio as well. He left the Bulls, and they were so united as a team. And of course, they had the best player in the league, but the organization itself was in disarray and dysfunctional. And he goes to San Antonio, which is the exact opposite of Chicago.
Right.
In terms of unity, this is how we do things. We're very communal. Even though we have transcendent players, there isn't one that's sort of shining more than others. They all believe in sharing. And so he chose the right places to be in. And I'm sure, and I know that those experiences in Chicago, as well as San Antonio, and then he brought those to Golden State as a coach. And he also, and my tie with Steve Kerr is, and before I got to the Phoenix Suns, he was the GM there.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yes. And so I'm sure there were some things that he learned there as well. And now, and he's in Golden State, and he's very successful, and looks to identify with his players, and he does a great job.
Well, everybody that's watching, Antonio Williams, NBA scout, ESPN personality, former Nike executive. Two more questions before we go. One, this was a great idea. I loved it. I mean, I think we need more of these. Now Brady's going to be doing one. Tom Brady got signed. He's going to be doing one.
Right, he and LeBron.
Yeah. If you had to pick, and we could just pretend 1970s, I don't care. And I know which one I would pick. I'm telling you right now, I know which one. Give me, I think the Spurs would be not that interesting. I think they don't have that much personality.
Right.
Give me a team, but maybe you would think that'd be a great documentary. Give me another similar documentary. It could be NBA, NFL, NHL. What would you like to see?
I would honestly, Chris, especially, it's apropos given the struggles that Scottie Pippen had from a contractual standpoint, Michael Jordan being underpaid as well. The documentary that I would like to see is, and I'm deep diving a little bit, I would like to see a documentary on St. Louis Cardinals great Curt Flood.
Okay.
And reason being is because he is the first quote unquote modern day free agent. And all of the things that he went through to give players in all sports the right to play out their contract, go on the open market, and see what their talent warrants. And he went through a lot to provide this. And now it's sort of apropos as well, because we're going into baseball. The highest paid player in American professional sports is Mike Trout, $403 million.
Man,
he's a baseball guy.
Yeah,
that's not possible without Kurt Flood. So
interesting. I would have never guessed that from you. That's a good choice. My choice would be the Dallas Cowboys run 3 out of 4 years Super Bowl, because there were so many characters. You had the triplets. You had Jerry Jones, Jimmy Johnson, the feud, similar to, and we're in Dallas, obviously, so it hits home. And I covered the team. There were so many characters. Deion Sanders. Then they had the crazy stuff going on, the feud, the breakup. Barry Switzer coming on. I think that would be a fascinating one. I think it would be as good as the Bulls documentary.
It'd be fascinating. And to your point, you have all of those storylines.
Storylines are key.
Yes, you have all of these storylines where this team is uber successful, and you have all this dysfunctional behavior going on. So it would be so interesting for sure. It would be awesome to see. Do you think we'll see it? You think we'll see it?
In a lot of trouble with drugs and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah,
so a lot of stuff off the field too. It would really make for an interesting documentary. They were successful on the field. They had egos. They had personalities. And it's the Dallas Cowboys. They are the #1 rated. They're America's team. They're the #1 rated, like 8 out of 10 games every year. They're the highest rated games because everybody hates them or loves them. So I think that's an interesting one. You wanted
Do you think we'll get it?
What's that?
Do you think we'll see it?
No, but I think it would be a great one. I don't know if anybody would open up enough, because the stories behind the scenes. Woo, there were some great ones. You wanted to end, unfortunately, today, the passing of Jerry Sloan. He was in this documentary. He was a Hall of Fame coach. What are your thoughts on that? And it's a sad day for the NBA.
It's a sad day. It's 2020 just won't it just won't quit. It is 2020 has been relentless. And Coach Sloan, when you watch those Utah teams that the Bulls played in 97 and 98 for their 5th and 6th titles, those teams took on the persona of Jerry Sloan, and who was a very tough, very hard-nosed Hall of Fame player. And what was so ironic for Jerry Sloan as well is the fact that for him to deliver the first NBA championships to Utah and his first championships as a coach, he was having to go through and combat the very team where he had most of his success as a player in Chicago.
Wow.
And so it was very ironic to see that. And again, a sad day for the basketball community, because Jerry Sloan, what he represented for the Utah Jazz, what he represented as a player, what he represented for us as basketball fans in terms of his approach, it's you can't say enough about that. And certainly prayers to his family, and just very sad. But that's his tie to the Last Dance, his tie to the Bulls organization.
Wow. And Tony Williams, always great insight. Love chatting with you, always talking with you. We'll keep this going. I love all the insight you give us. So thank you very much.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Again, thank you for sharing the platform. Stay healthy, stay safe. I appreciate it, Chris. Looking forward to doing it again.
You got it, buddy.